I had a doctorate of philosophy in sexual violence recovery, specializing in 7 different areas. And the judge looked and he said, "We won't be requiring any more. You've done enough. Thank you, Dr. Stevens. This man has a PhD. He can sit down. We can assume
Wow.
that he's a
Yeah.
credible expert."
Yeah.
And then after that, Ivan, I've never kind of been questioned again. But this is why sometimes I think as someone
Yep.
who's coloured, someone who's Māori, we
Yeah.
have to work 3 to 4 times harder than our European
Yeah.
counterparts because of this unconscious bias, because of this
That's true.
racism.
Like because of that, racism still happening in New Zealand, and so it's unequal playing field. You have to do
Yes,
more,
yes.
isn't
That's
it?
right, to do more, and that's right. In fact, that's that's exactly what I think. If you're going to be playing in this game, you've got to level
Mm,
up, and you work
mm.
twice as hard.
I want to congratulate doing HD and now your Dr. Alexander Stevens too.
I love it at graduation, Ivan. I think there's nothing more regal than when they say, "Yeah, Dr. Alexander Windsor Stevens II." I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
It sounds like a king.
it does. Well, it's interesting because Windsor came from acknowledging the royal family. This is on my Māori side.
Also,
And then the name Stevens was originally Tiffany, and then obviously the second because my dad is Alexander
oh
Stevens the
wow,
first. So
wow, how
he decided in
beautiful.
his infinite wisdom and to call me after him. And that's an interesting story, Ivan, because essentially my mum went to when my mum was giving birth to me, my dad decided rather than stay with her, he would go to the births, deaths, and marriages, and call me after him rather than wait for my mum and him to do it. He went to the And then my mum said, "I think I'm gonna call him Hemi," and he went, "No, I've already called him, and here's the document."
Well, I think he has a foresight because he know there will be a doctor in front of your name, so
Yes.
that rhyme beautifully.
Thank you. I owe a gratitude to you, Ivan, because as you know, when I met you, the first time we were doing them, when I initially did the Masters of Mental Health and Addictions, and you went up there and you were, presenting, and I thought you were fantastic. Um, I thought you weren't boring, you weren't stale, you weren't vanilla, there was difference, and I thought this is fantastic. And even though I switched my masters to Māori health, I never forgot, those elements of working in our field. And I just thought, actually, when I do my PhD, which is in sexual violence recovery, there's lots of elements of mental health and addictions that come with it.
And I want to also acknowledge that if people didn't know, because I have friends who have done PhD, how hard it is.
Mm.
Like the work that you go through, the dedication, the lonely journey, the time you spend to actually get
Mm.
a PhD. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
I mean, my journey took 7 years. Initially, it was going to be 3, but then COVID came along. My dad died. There were a couple of other things, so it all kind of came up.
Mm.
So by the time I got my PhD, if it was a child, it'd be 7. I would have well and truly sent it on its way to independence by now. It could, you know, shoo, go, do your thing. So, it is hard work. And I think one of the things I take gratitude in is that when I did it, it's not been that long ago, 2003 is when I graduated. This was pre-AI. So
Mm.
actually, I can say hands on heart, this was all my own
Yes,
genuine work,
exactly.
Um, I don't even think Grammarly existed at that stage maybe, so it was all hard work, and dedication to get me through. I do take great pride because that PhD really has opened opportunities to be able to not only, get myself ahead in terms of, working as
Mm.
senior lecturer at AUT, but it's also allowed me opportunities to work with men, at the Royal Abuse Commission. It's also been able to get me
Wow.
at the table in government to advocate for our men. So it really has afforded me opportunities. And privilege and Maori aren't 2 words that you would see often side by sides, but it is an interesting position because that's exactly what I've got.
I also think the work that you are doing is so important because it gave you the platform necessary to carry on and
Yes,
advocate for, especially you Maori and non-Maori men
yes,
who
yes,
have been sexually abused, isn't it?
yes.
And having that voice is so important.
One of the things that, I often say is that I originally wanted to be professor of happiness. That's
Mm.
actually what I wanted to specialize with. I've ended up with sexual violence recovery, so I don't know how exactly that turned so fast from one thing to another. Yet it's needed because there's in New Zealand, it's still a taboo subject,
Mm. Yes.
irrespective of gender and ethnicity. And essentially, one of the things I've realized, my friend, is that my role will only be to prepare the ground, I think, to allow the shoots to come up,
Mm.
to allow people to come forward. So I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime before we see a huge dent. But if I could contribute, it would just be laying the foundation. Which is interesting for me because I don't do gardening. These aren't laboring hands. And so I have to kind of push myself, and challenge spaces in a way that's been something that is familiar to me. Yeah.
And I want to if that is okay to go back to even the beginning of who is Dr. Alexander. I mean like Stevens too. Who
Yes.
are you? I
Yes.
mean how and what bring you to the journey of deciding to do the topic specifically about
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So look, I'll do it in a traditional Māori sense, right? So I'll say kia ora koutou katoa, ko mamaru te waka, ko manga, tōria te manga, ko te pātu te marae. Ka wakatoria te awa, ko muri whenua te iwi, nā koe nui tonu e. So kia ora, I'm Alexander. I hail from the 5 tribes of Muri Whenua all the way up north. As you kind of reach the Kaitaia all the way up to the lighthouse, that's my area.
Mm,
And I also come from Mangamuka, which isn't that far from Ngāpui. I am the oldest of my direct family, um, and I'm just over 40. I'm not going to say how old I am because, but I'm still in a position where there's still enough moisturizer in the bottle to help me look youthful. So, I can, which I'm loving. Um,
you have a great
uh,
skin, I have to say.
Thank
Even
you.
yeah, but
I moisturized just before I came on. I just thought, oh God, I hope the camera's going to be forgiving today. So it is. So a little bit about me. So look, I was raised in a home that was full of domestic violence, that
Mm,
was filled with all kinds of challenges. My father is Maori, my mother is Pākehā. So for me, lots of little challenges, but of course one of them is, well, who am I and how do I identify? Um, Later on, I just thought, well, I thought it was a blessing because it was like, which scholarship can I now apply for? All of them, apparently. So let's just go for gold. But at the time, it was hard as a young person. Um, like I touched on, so there was lots of family violence. So to me, between the ages of 0 to say 11, I thought that this was normal. I thought that this
mm,
is what all families went through. And I remember staying at a friend's house, and during that time, I remember that he dropped a knife on the ground, and I tensed up because I just thought, oh no, he's gonna get it. And
mm,
but what happened, Ivan, is that nothing happened. He picked up the knife and people just kept eating.
mm,
I was more shocked that he didn't even wipe the knife. He just
mm,
ate straight from the floor. I was like, ugh, but and then the violence, and I just thought, wow. So, and by then my mum had left my dad, and I
mm,
remember asking her, is this what we went through the norm? And she said no, and I remember it really shocked me,
mm,
for a long time that
mm,
that this wasn't the norm. That I could have had a
mm,
different life, being violence free and so on and so
mm,
forth. Um, and it is what it is, but it's one of the reasons why I've ended up working in family harm.
mm,
The other thing, I guess, when I think about my own life, is my own father had bipolar and was schizoaffective as well. So he had his own challenges, and especially
mm,
not medicated. So,
mm,
when there were good days, my brother, it was
mm,
great. And
mm,
when there were bad days, there were absolute
mm,
bad days. So,
mm,
and so
mm,
growing up, I think for me, mental health, violence, those were kind of like the norms. And then the sexual violence recovery that came up when I was 16,
mm,
and got my first disclosure. I didn't know anything about the topic, didn't know how to deal with it.
mm,
And then I found out that that man, yeah, he committed suicide a year later, and
yeah,
it really struck me. So, here are these
yeah,
different themes that
yeah,
come up where I live in South Auckland.
yeah.
And then in between time, I identified as gay. Now it's asexual because different ways didn't exist back in the day.
That's right. Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, how much harder is life going to get at that stage? So and so I guess for me, I've spent a long time kind of figuring out my own journey,
Mm,
wanting
mm,
to understand, where's my past taking me, and then along the way
mm,
meeting some beautiful human beings like yourself
mm.
that have helped me think about my own journey and where I kind of see myself. So that's a little bit
Thank you
about
so
me.
much for sharing it, my friend, because I think that truly show who you are as a human being, because you turn all the feels into fire, a passion,
Mm,
and
yes.
transcend into power. I think that just show the kind of person you are, my friend. That is just amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember with the moment when my parents divorced, I was so happy,
Mm,
and
mm,
I
mm,
thought, "Yay." And then, like I said,
mm,
then I thought, "Uh-oh, people are having boyfriends and girlfriends, but I'm not attracted to either. What the hell does this mean? Oh, crap, now another challenge." So it's been a challenge, find a way forward, challenge, find a way forward.
yeah.
But when I
Yeah.
event so eventually, when I ended up working mental health and addictions, it was
Mm,
just like home in a
mm,
sense,
mm.
you know? Yeah.
And so I understand, like of course that's driven by your own experience, seeing the world that you live
Yeah.
in, and of course you also have this passion you really want to understand and also bring the change into the
Mm.
things that you witnessed. So do you still remember how you get into the mental health in the first place?
Yeah, I was doing this is a while ago, but
Yeah.
back in the day, I was, facilitator for a group with Rainbow Youth.
Y-
So I
Oh,
was, like,
awesome.
17 or 18. We just
Yes.
thought we could change the world. I just love how deluded I was back then, Ivan, you know what I mean? We just thought and
Not
can I
at all. I look, Rainbow, you still here because
Yes, yes, true,
individual like
true,
yourself. Yeah.
true. And back then in the olden days, as my mentees would say now, back in the olden days, I grew up in an era where you still could be fired for being in the rainbow community,
Mm,
where we weren't in the Human Rights Act at that point. So, like things that people take for granted.
mm,
My colleagues and I, along with other people in the community, protested, advocated to make long-term change. So so I guess and that's where I kind of picked up the mental health and addiction stuff,
mm,
and then along the way, we met some people that had some pretty rough, lives or had been rejected by their parents, and,
mm,
so although I haven't done drugs myself, I know the pain of watching somebody else trying to pull
mm,
themselves
mm,
out of it, you
mm.
know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and, uh And so I guess that's where I kinda got a taste for it. Later on, along the journey, one of my close friends at the time, he had had his own journey with mental health and addictions, and, when we became friends, he it became apparent that we just had so much that was in common.
Mm,
He reminded me of my dad, but without the violence.
mm,
He
mm,
he yeah, he was kind, but he also had faced a lot of stigma, especially with schizophrenia. So
mm,
I felt an affinity towards this person.
mm,
He
mm,
wasn't in the rainbow community, but he himself felt judged and excluded, and I thought, "Well, actually, I know what that feels like to be judged and
mm,
excluded," and,
mm,
we became friends for a very, very, very long time, And and to be quite honest with you, with all my different quals, of which there are 35, but lots of those quals were actually designed to support him
Mm.
on his own journey. So I'd already finished my counseling one, but to really kind of work and understand what he was going through, that's when I did the mental health and addictions, because I just thought, look, services aren't working,
Yes.
and what can I do in my own capacity to be
Wow.
a support person?
I
Um, yeah.
My friend, you have so much insight. I was just thinking this young man, when he himself went through all his challenges himself,
Mm,
you still decided to gift. You decided to say, all this happened to me. I see this world is unjust. How
yes.
can I change it? That is amazing.
Thank you.
Did you did you know that you have that inner fire in you?
I knew I had the spirit of determination.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, my brother, and it's helped me even now. Anytime someone says, "No, you can't, not allowed,"
Yeah.
I just think, "How wonderful! Step aside, and let me through." Um, and it's worked every time,
Wow. Wow.
within mental health addictions and even with our rainbow services, so often people say no, like it's the standard response, but no to me isn't good enough.
Wow.
To me, they'll say NO, but I'm thinking KNOW to know, we're gonna
I
do
like
this,
it.
we're gonna
Okay,
find a
I
way
know.
through. I think anytime you
Wow.
hear me use the word "ngā mihi," watch out,
Yeah, yeah,
because it's
yeah.
about to go down.
Yeah.
But 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 I also believe that, and I said this in a podcast not so long ago, sometimes for me, I know that creating
Mm,
change for other p people won't make me popular.
mm,
Right? So my story isn't gonna be like Wicked. There's gonna be no popular, there's gonna be nothing like that at all. In fact, mine's much more of a hard knock life, for us. So you've just kind of gotta make the best out of a bad situation. That's kind of honestly how I've seen it. Um, Sometimes even metaphorically speaking, sometimes when I feel like even when I've been kicked in the gut, I just think, "Right, I've gotta get up. I've gotta keep
mm,
going. Don't have a
mm,
choice."
mm.
Because I know that there's a lot riding on things, so yeah.
I you make it sound easy, but I know, I mean, so often you have to go so deep within yourself,
Mhm,
because it can be a lonely journey as well. Like
mm,
you might have people who support you, or you might decide that, this is what I'm going to do regardless what people going to say.
mm,
And there's the aspirations that you carry, and like the podcast names, that authenticity, that it's not because people give it to you, it's because your inner knowing say, this is not good enough. I'm
no.
not going to walk away and pretend I didn't see it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Even if it means I'll lose contact, because some people will say, "Oh god, don't do it. It's not worth it." I'm
Wow.
like, "Yes, it is."
I like your spirit. That's awesome. So-
One of the reasons I actually ended up at AUT as senior Māori academic is for this
Mm,
very thing, Ivan. How do
mm,
we how do we create how do we create opportunities for our Māori, and for me also Pacific students who access AUT? Because we know that there's lots of challenges
yes.
like racism, like
Yes.
discrimination.
Yes.
So, and then I'm also about other minority groups as well, right? Because I think
Mm,
if we can work to support Māori, then often these other things can kind of sort themselves out. And I have to be honest, when I was doing my PhD, it would almost be on a weekly basis. I'd be challenging um, AUT on various things. So when they offered me a job, I thought it was hilarious.
oh, good on you. My God. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so this year's a great example, Ivan, of opportunities, because sometimes I think people don't know what they don't know.
Yes.
So then you'd have to raise awareness,
Yes.
that, that these actions are stopping people from getting into this course, and how can we remove these barriers and help people find a way forward? Not next week, the week after is graduation. That's always my favorite time
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you see everyone, in costumes and academic
Yes.
regalia, and they've worked so hard to get to it. And there are certain students I look at and
Yeah.
I think, I know your story. I know what you've had to do to get here. Normally, I didn't realize this, but I'm a one clap person. On I didn't realize that other people noticed it. And then, so I've done this. I've done like 4 graduations now, and then one of the professors came up to me and she said, "Hey, you're that one hand clap guy." She said, "I like the fact," and she said, "And if you're impressed, you'll do 2 claps." And
Oh,
like I
that's
said, "Look."
funny.
I said, "There's hundreds of people coming through. You get
Yeah.
sore hands. In sign
Oh,
language,
funny.
they do this, and I
Yeah.
I wanna do this maybe
Yeah.
instead, to
Yeah.
kind of acknowledge them, but
Yeah.
it is
Oh,
true.
funny.
You get 1 clap out of me, and if I'm impressed or I know your story, you'll get 2 claps.
I want to go back to what you say about AUT because I know what you're talking about, even though that itself is going to be a long topic because
Yes.
our institutions system is framed around Western's kind of academic
Mm,
format.
mm,
The way you conduct research and all that, the
yes.
methodologies, they are so westernized
Mm,
that it's
mm,
so individually focused.
yes.
So to really have the space to bring that Maori kaupapa, that
Mm,
narrative, and the way that
mm,
it should be conducted, honor the Maori principle, territory,
yes.
and all that is huge. And sometimes you need to challenge the status quo and say, yes,
Mm,
this is how your Western society conduct manner and all that, but this is not
yes.
how we find
Yes.
our identity, tell a story and all that. Yeah.
Yes. 100%. I'm really fortunate that my
Mm,
line management are completely supportive of all the work that I do. And to be honest, Ivan, I prefer when people say, "Look, I don't know this. This
mm,
isn't my expertise,"
mm,
rather than someone say, and this used to happen in hospitals, "Oh, I've done a cultural competency course. I know what I'm talking about." And then I'll be like, "How long was this cultural course?" It was 8 hours. Awesome. 8 hours of, like, how can you possibly incorporate 8 hours of which culture, which training, which background? So, um, part of my role when I used to work in public health as well as
mm,
in the DHBs will sometimes work with medical professionals around improving how they engage with
mm,
patients.
mm.
So as a quick story, and I shouldn't laugh, but one I remember working with a doctor and I said, "So you got punched in the face because you made a racist comment, is that correct?" And he's like, "Yes." And I said, "So how can we improve how can we improve your bedside manner so that you don't get hit next time?"
Wow.
So yeah, these are just some of the things that
Yes.
honestly, that come up time and again. Yeah.
And so, my friend, like again, it
Mm.
takes certain stand and belief about what you hold to keep
Mm,
chipping away a system that is so much bigger than us.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's one of the reasons why I did 35 quals, because every
Mm,
time the system tried to change or maneuver, I had to go
mm,
with it.
mm,
I mean, people say, "Are you a nerd?" And the answer is yes, but also I'll give you an example. So, if I'm not advocating for people in education at AUT, then you'll find me in the court system working with mainly Māori and Pacific men who have a huge history of mental health addictions and having been abused. So they haven't abused others, but they have been abused. So part of my job, which is why I get all these different
mm,
qualifications, is to
mm,
write court reports to help
mm,
the court and judge understand who
mm,
is this person in front of you.
mm,
Not
mm,
excuse their behavior, but
mm,
be able to provide a clinical diagnosis of all that these are all the challenges. This is why A, B, and C, and yeah, as a result, they are doing therapy. They would like to be the best at. They just don't know how to, and this is a way forward. So, and sometimes, not always, sometimes the other lawyer might ask about myself. Who are you? your Western thinking, what is your background? And I have to say to you, I do love when a lawyer says to me, "Could you give us your qualifications?" Thinking it's, and I'm like, I'll say to them, "Well, I have 35 qualifications. Would you like all of them or some of them?"
That's crazy, isn't it?
And then,
35.
the lawyer looks at me and he's like, "35?" I'm like, "Yes. Would you like me to go postgraduate down or
Yeah,
undergraduate
yeah. Oh,
up?"
oh
And
my
I can
god.
remember once I said
Mm.
I had a doctorate of philosophy and sexual violence recovery, specializing in 7 different areas. And the judge looked and he said, "We won't be requiring any more. You've done enough. Thank you, Dr. Stevens. This man has a PhD. He can sit down. Let's just, we can assume
Wow.
that he's a
Yeah,
credible expert."
yeah,
Um, and then after that, I've never kind of been questioned again. But this is why sometimes I think, as
yeah,
someone who's coloured, someone who's Maori,
yeah,
we have to work 3 to 4 times harder than our European
yeah.
counterparts because of this unconscious bias, because of this racism.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to show you my room. It's a little bit messy, but on my walls are some of my quals, and sometimes I wake up and I think, which qual am I going to access today to help a person? You
And
know?
you highlight the truth, like because of that, racism still happening in New Zealand, and so it's unequal playing field. You have to do
Yes,
more,
yes.
isn't
That's
it?
right. We
Yeah.
have to do more, and that's right. In fact, that's that's exactly what I think. If you're going to be playing in this game, you've got to level
Mm,
up, and you work
mm.
twice as hard. And honestly, it's so satisfying when you look at other people's faces. I can
Right.
remember when I worked at a government organization, and this was leading up to the Royal
Oh my
Abuse
god.
Commission, and someone said, "Well, I," and didn't know who I was.
Yes.
And they said, "How did you get to where you are?" And I went, "Oh, that's an interesting question. Why do you ask?" And they said, "Well, I have a degree in criminology, and psychology from the University of Auckland, and I don't understand, and I applied for the same job that you've got. I don't understand how you got it, and I didn't." And I said to them, "Look, I support your pseudoscience qualifications. Good for you." And then when I jumped online, somebody goes, "Good morning, Dr. Stevens. It's really good to see, blah, blah, blah." And then they freaked out. And so I just thought,
Wow.
ha, 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 ha. But, you can't do that because it's not professional. You just smile
Yeah.
like this. And, your reputation, I think, holds,
Yeah.
especially in New Zealand, Ivan, because it's
Yeah.
only like 2 degrees of separation.
Yes.
Um, and so sometimes silence and holding back the tongue can be the most
Mm.
powerful way of, saying who you are.
Absolutely, and also the dignity to uphold yourself with that manner and carry forward as well. And you face it every day. You still have, like soldier on. I don't think people understand how hard it can get sometimes when they are not in like your shoes as considered not mainstream like myself, because I'm talking
Yes.
about even working for Asians, sometimes I get that equal
Yeah.
challenge of asking
Yeah, of course.
who are you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And I have to say, but even like the term Maori and
Mm,
Pacific and Asian, what does it actually mean?
mm,
Because there's so many different tribes in Hapu. So, like Ngāpuhi and Ngāti Kahu, which is where I'm from, is very different to Waikato, which
mm.
is very different to Ngaitahu. So what you're finding is, especially with these labels and terms, is that Māori are going back to using iwi and Hapu terms,
That's right.
you
Yeah.
know? It's like Asian. What does that even mean? Because it's such a huge area. So, yeah, I'm always careful about, yeah, being mindful, when I'm about those kind of terms, because sometimes I think they can create spaces, but they can also create barriers as well. And
I
one of
agree.
one of the interesting things I'm also finding, so in my family,
Yeah.
for example, my youngest brother, his fiance and children are Cambodian,
Hey.
Maori, Pākehā,
Ooh.
right?
Oh
So
my god.
I think it's a scholarship's dream. If they decide to do it, they could go for all of it.
Yes.
My second oldest brother, his partner is Raro Māori, and then my niece, and so now my niece is 23. She's got children that are, Niuean, Raro Māori,
Awesome.
Pākehā,
Wow.
Chinese.
Yeah.
You
It must
know?
be fascinating when you guys get together and the
Oh yes,
food.
Yes, yes. I'm like, which holiday are we celebrating now? I've lost count, kind of thing. But that's the
Wow.
beautiful thing about
Yeah.
bringing, especially in South Auckland, there's just such a fusion that we're seeing it more and more and more. So I guess for me, through all this hard work of trying to find a
Mm,
way forward, and
mm.
especially getting rid of generational burdens, I'm hoping that the next generations won't have to hold the same stuff, which
And
gets
and
me.
s and so that's really, uh, can bring us to the PhD topics that you've been doing and the
Mm,
advocacy work,
sure.
yeah, I mean that also because you want to address the past trauma
Yes.
individual have
Yes.
experienced and how to
Yes.
move forward.
So look, to be fair, ah, I don't know whether it's
Mm,
3.5 or close to 4,000 men that I've worked with in over 20 something years. There's a lot.
yeah.
But the thing that always comes up, that I found is normally, so for context, I've worked in areas like Te Ahomai, that's the acute
Mm,
mental health service. I've worked with organizations like Odyssey House, which is a
yes.
drug and alcohol treatment service. I've also worked as a board member with community organizations like Changing Minds, which is
Hi.
based in Mount Eden. Yeah,
Yes.
I've amongst other services. These are and so I've worked in a broad range of
Mm,
services, including Rainbow Youth. Oh, and
mm,
then, as you know, or may remember briefly, I was CEO for Outline as well. So there's lots of different.
wow.
But the thing that comes up again and again, especially when I was working with clients, is I would get huge rates
Mm,
of disclosures and but no appropriate referrals. Where do these men go?
wow. Yeah.
This is what led up to my PhD, just for context.
Yes.
So often people would have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, they might be suicidal,
Yes.
um, and they would be on some pretty heavy drugs like clozapine or olanzapine. And
Yeah.
but when you talk to them, you realize that they had never often told anyone else.
Wow.
And the drug taking, like the marijuana, the alcohol, all that stuff, that actually came about because of all the trauma that they had experienced.
Mm,
So actually, if they had help sooner rather than later, it's highly likely they wouldn't have gone through acute mental health
absolutely.
services.
Yeah.
What we knew at that time was that there was about 80%, 80% of the clients in acute mental health had experienced some kind of sexual violence and or trauma. I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked the most recent stats in prisons, but I'm pretty sure that's roughly the same for our men inside prisons as well. I haven't looked
Wow.
at our women statistics because that's not my
Mm,
specialty, but we
sure.
think it's a roughly, I'd say between 72 and say 80%
Wow.
of our men have also experienced some kind of abuse. So to me, I was thinking, look, we're getting these huge rates,
Mm,
but what are we doing
yeah.
about it? Then thinking about some of the work that you've done within the mental health sector, I was thinking like we have mental health awareness campaigns and we have these different topics. But what happens when you've got something like sexual abuse? It's such a dark
Yes.
topic. No one wants to talk about it. When I
Mm,
worked at Rape Crisis, bless, we were trying to do a what do you call it, my friend? Like when you have some kind of animal or a logo associated, like for example, with you've got like, with violence, you've got like black ribbon and you got
yes.
white ribbon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we went to Rape Crisis, the thought was maybe do like a panda,
Ah.
but what happened was we couldn't find anything. No matter how cute or fluffy it didn't matter when it came to the topic of
Mm,
sexual violence. No one would want to have anything to do with it. And
mm,
I can even remember going, when we were looking at getting, at well-known stores that I shouldn't mention, sometimes, when you buy something, they'll say, "Would you like to donate
mm.
$1 to whatever the charity is?" Do you know what I mean? When you go to
Yeah.
a shop sometimes,
Yes.
those
Yeah.
big branded shops.
Yeah.
Well, initially they accepted they wanted to work with Rape Crisis until people started making a complaint and
Oh
say to
my
customers,
god.
"Actually, this is very uncomfortable. We won't be coming back." And so they contacted us and said, "Look, we're sorry, we're not able to
What?
support you because we've actually had complaints about this, which we haven't had with other,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Kids Can or Heart
yeah.
Foundation. These are feel good, or the branding is really good. It makes you feel that you want to be part of it.
Oh
Whereas our one, no one wants to. Yeah, no one wants to be associated with it.
my God.
So, so we jumped a few years ahead, and I actually had hair at that stage. What I realized was, well, well, where do our men go to
Yeah,
um, get help?
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and that's kind of what started me on my PhD topic, looking at because this is the thing, is that it hadn't been done before. Where do men go?
Mm,
Māori like a huge accesses of online technology.
mm.
I guarantee you, when someone sees this podcast, I'll get a minimum of 2 or 3 people that will say, "This happened to me. I need some help." It always happens. But things like, so where do they go? What do they type into Google? What are they accessing? I mean, all these things we just didn't know. I can now tell you that at that stage, men were tending to go on the United States and going on African American and Hispanic
Oh,
websites,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
If they went onto a New Zealand website, the way that the funding is structured, it's mainly for women, but
yeah.
some of the websites, they can't say that because the funding is for the general population. So men would go
Mm,
on this site thinking it might be for them, and they would be told, "We only work with women."
mm,
Even though the website says we work with all people
mm,
in New Zealand, you
mm,
know? And so I thought, what would it be like to design a website similar to the Mental Health Foundation, now that I
mm.
think about this, where you could access knowledge and information at your own time, but also, see you as being in that picture without triggering you.
Wow,
That's the guts of how I got to my PhD topic.
wow. That is a deep thinking though, but you highlight the fact about the societal barrier,
Mm.
even the service barrier, and yeah, wow. Sorry, carry
Part
on.
of
Yeah.
No, no, part of this, so if we start to bring things together, then I started to think, well, we know that disability and the rainbow community have even higher rates of sexual abuse than our heteronormative counterparts, right?
Mm,
So having worked at Rainbow Youth, I was thinking, gosh, now I'm going to have to go out and interview not only men, but see how many diversities, and then understand what are the challenges that they're facing,
mm,
talk to people with multiple disabilities, tangata whaikaha is what we say in Māori, people
mm,
who through their own actions are actively
mm,
overcoming that barriers.
mm.
Um, and so I interviewed over 120 people,
That's a
and
lot.
yeah, it's huge because and the short story, my dear
But
friend,
yeah.
the short story is that, as I was interviewing these core men of about 31 men, word kind of got out
Yeah.
around building of this website,
Wow.
and then they wanted input. So then I thought, "Oh, how
That's
can I do this?"
amazing.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and I knew that I was on the right track,
Mm.
because most of those men stayed with me over the 7 years. They wanted to see the end
Wow.
product with their own lived experience. So I guess this is where this mental health addictions and all my life experiences kind of came into this space, and then we launched it, um, and it's just kind of taken off isn't the right word, but it's gained traction,
Yeah.
you know?
What is the
Uh,
name of the website?
StandingTallNZ.org.
Cool. I'll put a link.
It's free,
Yeah.
and, and I learned along the way. So I had to learn how to develop a website. I had to develop marketing and comms. It was fantastic, you know?
You do it all by yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I learned so much. Look, I'll give you an example. I learned that people get 3 seconds before they'll switch off and go
Mm,
into a different page. So you've got to make that page engaging. I learned that. Have you heard of the F approach? I'd never heard of this before. The F approach is when they read one line across,
mm,
scroll down,
mm,
second line, scroll down, and if they don't get that information, they'll just
mm.
log off. So what I can tell you, which I've never said in any other podcast, so this is an exclusive just for you, Ivan,
Thank you.
is that the average time that someone might spend on, say, a social or community web page might be, say, anywhere under a minute.
Mm,
but per page,
Mm.
mine is about 6 to 7 minutes. So it's actually 6 to 7 times higher than what the average range is, which I think is pretty cool. It means that we're hitting the right
Yeah,
the right target, the right messaging.
absolutely. Wow, amazing.
Mm. It's been a bit of a we've been shortlisted for a couple of awards. So at that stage, I kind of thought to myself, all right, now it's time to submit this thing. And I passed, obviously.
Yeah.
Flying colours, my
Wow.
friend. It's
I
not so
bet
much. Go on, what were
100
you going to say?
because people don't understand the PhD actually do not require 100 something over
Yes,
qualitative study.
yes,
That
yes,
show you going above and beyond. Usually like even 12, 13, 20s qualitative interview, that's
yes.
enough, but you have gone above and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It really was. I don't know. I mean, as you say, it was the
Mm,
best time. It was the worst time of my life. That PhD, honestly, I describe it to my students that I've got now. It's like having a child that
mm,
is with you for like 3 to 4 years, and so I hope you like children because you're about to have one, And the thing is that, and this is why I really appreciate what you're saying, is that only half of the people that enroll on a PhD will see it
mm,
through.
mm,
So you really have to have a passion.
mm,
And can I say to you, there were days where I just wanted to throw it all away.
mm,
One of my closest mates, Nigel, I said to him one day, I was like, bro, I just can't do this anymore. I keep hitting hurdles. I'm facing Western ideologies that's trying to stop
mm,
Kaupapa Māori from happening.
mm, mm,
Plus I'm trying to, do the best that I can to
mm.
manaki these men's stories. And I remember he said to me, he's like, look, you can't quit, not because, I don't want you to, he said, but because all these men have trusted you with their stories.
Yeah.
And where else are they going to go?
And my
And
friend, I don't think people understand if they have not. You're not just talking about the PhD study. You're pretty
no,
much saying all these individuals have kindly given you their story. It's
yes,
a tongue off to you, and so it's not just about the study, the research, and then you're facing westernized
mm,
pigeonhole methods to
yes,
compartmentalize story. You say that is not the way we want to honor individual. These are human beings.
yes,
And then you also carry on and wanted something that meaningful. So all these individuals feel their suffer have some meaning to it. So you
yes,
carry a lot. Jesus.
indeed. I can give you an example. Like some of the guys. So what we also know is that for some of our men, they also had reading and writing and numeracy. Some of them were illiterate. So this was the first time, and so they tend to write like text language.
Mm, mm,
Like to be
mm.
honest, like the number 2, the letter B.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I
Oh.
would write their responses in my thesis, I would be told you have to spell that out in full English. And I
Mm,
would say to them, "No, no, no, no. If I do that, then I'm taking the voice away from who they are." And they said, "But
absolutely.
this is a professional PhD. We don't have this kind of language." And I said to them, "If we take away their voice, we take away their identity, we take away their story." So this is an example. I'm like, "Right, ngā mihi, get out of my way. We're gonna," and I did. I did.
Good
I
on
wrote a
you.
around. I wrote a whole section around colonization, oppression. I didn't name people, but I quoted them, and
I love your approach because it is because you're saying yes, it is a research, but we need to be real. This
yes,
research is not just about the academy using it as a way to rank their system in the
no,
world.
no,
I'm doing this for my people. You
yes,
F the work out.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say to you, as a result of doing this PhD, like I've traveled the whole country from the top of the North Island all the way down to the south. I get recognized, which is an interesting thing. So can I just say to people that watch this, sometimes people come up to me and they're like, "Hey, you're the sexual abuse guy, right?" And I'm like, "Recovery, the sexual abuse recovery guy. Please don't yell out this when I'm in Manukau City or I'm in a cafe. Please don't
Yeah.
yell this out. People are looking." I was like, "Recovery, recovery.
Recovery,
Just
exactly.
Alexander." They're like, "Oh yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Oh,
I I I I tell you, I understand. It's like suicide prevention. It's not suicide. It's like
yes,
suicide
yes,
prevention.
Yes, prevention, right?
Yeah.
Prevention's the key word. So, yes, and in fact, yes,
Yeah.
it's very similar. In fact, the taboos between the two are
Mm.
very similar, and they crisscross over. So, anyway, back to you. I can see
No, I,
myself
I,
going off.
I tell you, there is so much aloha you carry with you, and the burdens, not burden, but I hear you, like that's why when you feel like it's just so overwhelmed, man, I'm so touched about everything you did and the mana you
Mm,
presented to individual and decide to move forward. That just, brother, wow.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You deserve, like the recognition and all that. This is not just PhD studies, it's way beyond it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that because self-care in our fields is
Mm,
key, right? So
mm,
I've got two mentees. I've got Sione and I've got Irie, and basically I'm future proofing because I realize if something happens to me, that's it. That narrative
mm,
stops. So I've got two young tane who are interested in coming into the sector, and then as soon as they are suitably, skilled and qualified, I will give them the keys to the car and I will retire. I'll go into my cottage. I've said this before, put up my electric fence, my keep outside.
I can't see you retiring. I mean, you will get so bored, to be honest.
It's true though. I mean, I think the work that we're in is always interesting. This is when people say, "Hey, I'm thinking about a career in mental health, or I'm thinking of a career in addictions." I'm like, "Yes," and you'll never get bored
Mm,
because you're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, people are interesting.
it is.
You know,
And I never
I mean, you
stop.
and I are a great example. I think we're both fascinating individuals.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, we have
You know,
our own rich
I know you
history.
don't like the attention on you because it's about me in this podcast, but it's true though. You're interesting, and
Oh,
that's
thank
why I
you, my
reached
brother.
out to you. And I said this to you before, but for people listening, I mean, when you said, "Do you have any more information, or if you want to know anything else, here's my info." I was the only one that wrote it down, and I thought, "Oh, this is, he's been so interesting, so fascinating. I'm gonna."
I tell you though, even this, I was thinking, there are so many topics that we can talk about. You
Mm,
are such a fascinating individual, and like you carry so many hats. You see all the challenges, right, from
mm,
gender to sexual orientation, like to age,
disability.
disability, mental
Oh
health
yes,
is
yes,
wide
yes. I worked at the
range.
Retirement Commission, the Reserve Bank. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Addictions, like, oh
Yep,
my God.
yep.
Yeah, and
I mean,
even South
yeah,
Auckland's, like whole communities that what you witness and
yes.
yeah, yeah.
What I say to people is that working in mental health and addictions doesn't mean that you'll just be stuck in the mental health and addictions social sectors. Mental health and addictions is everywhere.
Mm,
Like when I worked at the Retirement Commission, I said the same thing to the commissioner. How are we supporting people as they're getting older with mental health and addictions issues? How do we get them in a position where they're not going to be left in a state of poverty because they
mm.
haven't saved enough money? With the Reserve Bank, can you believe I ended up at the Reserve Bank? I scratched my head and thought, how the hell did I end up here?
Woohoo! I think that's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. Talking to the Reserve Bank governor and the team around how do we help raise awareness around mental
Mm,
health? How do we raise awareness around addictions so that when we're looking at these big decisions around lowering cash rates, so on
mm,
and so forth, we understand, hey, this will ripple out and affect people on different levels. So
absolutely.
you never get bored in the sector. And I'm sorry to say this, but I only one of the reasons I worked in this field, and I say this often, Ivan, is when a recession hits, the rates
Mm.
of addictions and mental health go up,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
When they
It's
level
happening
off,
right now. Yeah,
yes, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So when they level off, the rates are
yeah.
still there. So no
Mm,
matter where in society, whether we're in a good time or a bad time, there's always employment. And
mm,
I sometimes feel guilty that I'm working in a sector that is on others, but then I've also realized, well, actually, as you also know, this sector isn't meant for everyone.
mm.
And
Absolutely.
there are genuine human beings like yourself that do great work with other people. With me behind you going, I could be a better human being. I'm not going to today, but I could
Brother,
be.
You are amazing, especially having your knowledge and understanding into places where, like what you say, reserve bank, they couldn't have a better person
Mm,
to let
mm,
them see the reality of how it impact on people when they don't have what other people have. And
yeah.
that voices are so critical because they don't understand the social impact of decisions that can
Mm,
have for individual in a family where they already struggle.
yes.
And man, I don't know. I think, brother, you please don't retire.
One of my mentors would like me just to kind of slow it down a bit, you know. But yeah, I do love it though.
Mm,
And the other thing I also think about, you know, there's very few Māori and Pacific men that work in the sector. There's maybe less than
exactly.
three of us.
Exactly.
So yeah, I won't be retiring anytime soon, my friend.
And
I'll stop
and
retiring when my moisturizer, when my anti-wrinkle cream isn't so efficient.
but
If I can see wrinkles, then I'll look
but
at quitting
also
there.
in that kind of, like, credibility and caliber that you have, brother,
Mm.
like, it's not, you really work so hard of it. And the last questions, to be honest, like, we can have
Sure,
touched on
sure, sure,
so
sure.
many things, but what I really want to ask you is, actually, it's a two questions.
Oh, cool.
One
Two
is,
questions.
yeah, sorry, I'm a bit greedy. One
No, no,
one
no.
is the one is, what would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now, to
Run,
that
run, flee, escape,
run where?
invest in bitcoins. Don't bother buying CDs. They're useless in 20 years' time. Everything will be on Spotify. Invest.
Oh,
If,
that's
if,
funny.
if I had a time machine, I would say, look, you invented a time machine. You'll be fine. Keep going the way that you are.
Awesome.
I guess the thing I would say to him is, you know, all the hard stuff that you've gone through, the bullying, the violence, the discrimination, the hurt, the suffering from complete strangers, you know,
Mm,
you'll find a really clever and innovative way to put them in different qualifications that you can then bring together and start weaving to help other communities and other people who have gone through similar type things. The way that I think about this, Ivan, is that my PhD, if you think of the umbrella, my PhD is the handle. When I
mm,
open it up, all the qualifications, you know, kind of come
wow.
in so
Yes.
that, you know, when the brown stuff hits the
Wow.
fan from colonization, and I want
Yeah. Wow.
people
I
to
like.
decide which one to pull on. But now that it's doctor, you know, then it adds credibility. Yeah, and I guess for me, you know, some people want the title of doctor. I just wanted to get to the highest accolade so I could start to advocate at that.
Higher
If
level.
you follow what I mean, that was it. And it's
I
nice when you go to a conference, yeah.
I
But
totally hear you. It's like, you want to play the game with them. You want
yes,
to be part of that game, and that is the only way.
absolutely. Sometimes
Yeah.
people will say to me, "Wow, you're a doctor." It's like, yes, but don't have a heart attack in front of me. If you collapsed in front of me, I just slightly tap you with my foot and go, "Oh, he looks unconscious. Someone call
Oh my
111."
god,
You
you're
know,
so
because the only
funny.
observation I could say is you're unconscious.
Yeah.
That's my only observation. I don't know anything about medicine, you
Okay, you're
know?
so funny. Uh,
Um, that would be it. You know, what's your second question? I'm interested. I'm interested, Ivan, what your second question was.
I think there are many many Maori individual, especially still
Mhm.
being, I don't like to say it, but it's true. Like the how societies have painted as who they are and having that
Yes.
negative. What would you say to them? So
Yeah, what a great question, Ivan. So look, I'm still writing a book which is called How Not to Kill Your Māori Patients.
you're writing a book.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my,
How not to
awesome.
kill How not to kill your Māori patients in the healthcare system, a guide for Pākehā health professionals. But my editor said you cannot put Pākehā, you'll have to put the word tauiwi, it's too loaded. But when you look
Mm,
statistically, you know, it's racism and judgment that puts our farmers at risk. And then when people say,
absolutely.
oh, they're too lazy, they don't want to come back. It's that we don't want to come back, but we just don't want to get confronted with all this hate.
Exactly.
So what would I say, brother? I would say that we're not going anywhere, that you can do everything you can to restrict language, take away the treaty rights, but hey, we've been doing this for 200 years. And ultimately what have I learned is that our people are incredibly resilient. Like myself, they've got dark sense of humor, but that's how we get that's how we get through. We're
And I
not going
wish
anywhere.
and I wish one day we don't even have to have this conversation. It shouldn't
Yes.
be. My brother, yeah, witnessing whatever is going on, I'm not pleased myself. I'm not,
Mm.
yeah, I
No.
angry sometimes. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. I think very quick story, Ivan. I think when some of my Māori clients
Mm,
say to me that they look at the news and they feel distress,
mm,
when you have things like language or books, too much Māori words, the treaty
mm,
stuff, it really affects their mental health, and I think that's not okay.
mm,
That's not okay.
mm,
So, yeah, it's not.
as yeah, yeah. So my heart go out with you and your people, and I think if the world can recognize how resilient and how much we should learn from Maori to fight their language, to fight their
Mm,
culture, and really gave the credit that they deserved, the world would be a better place.
I think
I
so.
really
I
mean it.
think
Yeah.
so.
Mm. So keep on the good fight. And I always thinking about you, brother. And yeah, I have so much respect of you. Even before about 2 days, whew, this guy's is ridiculous.
I appreciate it. And can I say to you, I have missed your laugh, Ivan. It's so hearty and so full of happiness. Whereas when you hear me laugh, it's like, oh no, someone's done something bad, because I do a high pitched laugh.
I like the fact that
Your laugh, yeah,
you
warm and
still
happy.
you still can keep your sense of humor. I respect that, brother. The world that you navigate, you make it so light and easy. I know it's not. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So, but thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to apologize. I should have asked you whether you want to open with a karaoke. I didn't even, like honor that, and my bad.
No, 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 no problems at all. What I would say to you, Ivan, is that you've been the blessing. So actually, you've opened it with your laugh, you've closed it with your laugh. That to me is the best karakia.
But at least we can have a closing karaoke. Is that allowed?
Of course it is. If you want, would you like to do a closing karakia? I'd let you do it if you want to.
I'm not good at it. Yeah. So if
I
that's
tell you what, let me give me 1 second. I'll do the one that I often. It won't be in Māori. I do different karakias depending on the context. Yeah. But the
yes,
one that I like, you think I'd remember it off by heart, is a serenity prayer, because I just think it's such a good, you know, which is Aotearoa, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
I mean, thank you, my brother.